I am 14 years old. Father died 3 years ago, and Mother died a year ago. I became a singing girl. I went on board the boats and sang. I am tired of singing. I would like to live with somebody.
In 1853, a plan to rescue thousands of New York street children was announced by a new charity, the Children's Aid Society. It would send the children to live with families in rural America. By 1929, the society had relocated over 100,000 orphaned, abandoned, or neglected children. The trains that carried the children out of the city became known as Orphan Trains. This ambitious relocation effort began back in the 1850s in New York City, a time when 10,000 homeless children prowled the streets in search of money, food, shelter. 1,000 immigrants a day had been flooding into the city from rural America, from Europe. Work was scarce. Families crowded into shacks and tenements were easy prey to cholera, tuberculosis, and alcohol. The plight of these impoverished children became the obsession of a young minister, Charles Loring Brace. A member of a prominent Connecticut family, Brace had moved to New York City to complete his seminary training. He was horrified by the conditions he saw on the streets. As he wandered through the city, he talked with children, recording their stories in his diary.
May 19th, 1854. At dusk I found a girl in the 6th Street begging. Gave her a loaf of bread and followed her home. This little girl, 9 years old, without a bonnet, barefooted and thinly clad, is sent out every day to beg for money. In the evening at 12 o'clock, went down to the coffee cellars where the newsboys congregate. They were not more than 10 or 12 years old, yet they had all the manners of old roués, drinking their coffee, smoking, and talking of gambling. Visited the 11th Ward in the afternoon. 5,000 children throng the streets at all times. The younger girls sweep the crosswalks. The older girls prostitute themselves.
Because of their wanderings, the children became known as street Arabs. Some joined violent gangs. Others survived by selling matches, newspapers, or pieces of old rags. Their numbers are almost incredible, said the chief of police. They are destined for a life of misery, shame, and crime.
When Mother was dying, she warned me against going to live with strangers. I became a singing girl. People said I had a good voice. I used to sing in the beginning to keep away those sad thoughts. But soon I made use of my voice for a living.
I go on board the boats and sing, and I gather as much money as I can. I have no other way of getting along. Sometimes I make very little by it, sometimes nothing. All the night I was out in the street, and no one spoke to me or asked me who I was.
The police began arresting vagrant children, some as young as 5, and locking them up with adult criminals. Reformers urged that children be sent to more modern institutions called houses of refuge and orphan asylums where they could be trained. In an era when most children were expected to work, Brace argued against the asylums, said the skills they taught had little practical use.
The best of all asylums for the outcast child is the farmer's home. The great duty is to get these children of unhappy fortune utterly out of their surroundings and to send them away to kind Christian homes in the country.
Brace knew that the greatest need for labor was in the expanding farm country to the west, where there was a long tradition of employing children as apprentices and hired hands. He believed that America's Christian farmers would welcome the homeless children, not only give them work, but treat them as new sons and new daughters. He imagined sending tens of thousands to the country. In 1853, Brace founded the Children's Aid Society to arrange the trips, raise the money, obtain the legal permissions needed for relocation. To recruit likely children, Brace and his staff of volunteers visited orphanages and reformatories and the homes of impoverished parents.
Found one room not more than 12 foot by 10 with 2 women and 5 children. The boy, Peter Casey, would like to go to the country, but the mother said she would rather die than part with him. In general, the mothers do not like to part with their children, even to get them in much better situations.
But desperate parents often saw little hope. Many surrendered custody of their children in hopes of ensuring their survival.
This is to certify that I am the mother and only legal guardian of Hattie Moxley. I hereby freely and of my own will agree for the Children's Aid Society to provide a home until she is of age. I hereby promise not to interfere in any arrangements they may make.
To the children, surrender often meant an inexplicable break with their families. 3 times a month, agents of the society assembled the children into groups, ranging from 6 to 150. The groups were booked, at a discount, on regular passenger trains.
The trips were planned so as to arrive on Friday, usually leaving New York Tuesday noon. We filled one end of the car, or if the party was large enough, a coach was put on for us.
The journey usually lasted for 3 or 4 days. The children never left the train. They slept in their seats. On the journey west, the agents tried to comfort the children. They gave each child a hand Bible and spoke of the good homes that awaited. Sometimes the agents sang to the children.
Where the fragrant breezes sigh, from the city's blight to the green woods bright, like the birds of summer fly. Oh, children, dear children, young, happy, pure.
As the train drew nearer to its destination, the children's clothes were changed, their faces washed. They were prepared for the defining moment of the trip, the distribution. In local newspapers, notices had run in advance encouraging people to come see the homeless children on the stage of a meeting hall. As the children waited to be displayed, they were urged to make a good impression on the audience.
November 7th, 1883. I was a witness of the distribution of 40 children in Minnesota. The children arrived at about 3:30 p.m. and were taken directly from the train to the courthouse. Mr. Matthews set the children one by one before the crowd and gave a brief account of each. Applicants for the children were then admitted in order behind the railing and rapidly made their selection. If the child gave the assent, the bargain was concluded on the spot. It was a pathetic sight to see those children, tired young people, weary, travel-stained, confused by the excitement, peering into those strange faces. Hastings' heart.
The distributions continued for 75 years, until 1929. The local minister, banker, doctor, and other leading citizens were asked by the Children's Aid Society to form a committee to check qualifications of potential foster parents. An agent explained the society's rules to the crowd. All placements were to be made on a trial basis. Legal adoption was not required. Dissatisfied children could leave. Those who stayed were expected to work as contributing members of the household. The foster parents were asked to house, feed, and educate the New York children in the same manner as their own. Brace's system put its faith in the kindness of strangers. The children whom no one selected were escorted back to the train and taken to the next stop on the line. Children were sent to Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Kansas, and Texas. 47 states in all. They were taken to sod houses and cabins, to large farmhouses and shopkeepers' homes in town. From the very beginning, many of these placements made so hastily did not go according to plan.
Julia McCann came to us with very erroneous ideas. She expected to be taken care of by rich people.
I had your son for about 3 months, and he did not suit me. So I gave him up to Mr. Gelson, and he gave him to a good farmer, and the farmer could not keep him.
We farmers can hardly imagine how it is that these boys can be so awkward on a farm. I have promised to give them a horse apiece if they will stay and be good boys. I fear that they will run away.
Children drifted from farm to farm. Some even made their way back to New York. There were stories of children landing in reform school in Michigan. From Indiana, rumors of children on the dole. A Southerner named J.H. Mills claimed that men needing labor, their slaves being set free, take these boys and treat them as slaves. The record books are filled with names and dates, details of departures and arrivals, but say little about the quality of the children's treatment. The extent of abuse is unknown. The Society's goal was to visit each child once a year, but there were only a handful of agents to monitor thousands of placements. With reports of children drifting through the countryside, Brace consented in 1883 to an independent investigation. It found the local committees were ineffective at screening foster parents. Supervision was lax. Many older boys had run away. But its overall conclusion was positive. The majority of children under 14 were leading satisfactory lives.
Dear Mr. Brace, when I lived in New York, I had no bonnet, and now I have more bonnets than I can wear. And I get no whippings, and I have a father and mother and brothers and sisters here, and they are kinder to me than my own ever were. I think I will never be happier than I am now.
In New York, the children of a new generation of immigrants were facing deprivation and homelessness. Brace continued to insist that removal from the city was the street children's best hope for deliverance. He used photographs like these, made by his protege Jacob Riis, to dramatize their plight. The Society boasted about the story of two street kids, Andrew Burke and John Brady, who were sent to the same Indiana town on the same day. On arrival, the judge who adopted Brady considered him the homeliest, toughest, most unpromising boy in the whole lot. He said, "I had a curious desire to see what could be made of such a specimen of humanity." John Brady grew up to be governor of Alaska. His friend Andrew Burke grew up to be governor of North Dakota. The Orphan Train program was widely imitated. 40,000 children were sent to Catholic communities by a religious order, the Sisters of Charity. And organizations in Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago relocated thousands more. When Charles Loring Brace died in 1890, he was acclaimed as the most influential child saver of the 19th century. But in the 20th century, America's vision of childhood was changing. The emphasis was shifting from the virtues of work to the benefits of play, from children's economic value to their emotional needs. On May 31st, 1929, the Children's Aid Society sent 3 boys to Sulphur Springs, Texas. It was the last of the orphan trains. Back when he began, Brace said, "When a child of the streets stands before you in rags, with tear-stained face, you cannot easily forget him. And yet you are perplexed what to do. The human soul is difficult to interfere with. You hesitate how far you should go."